They said money could buy peace, but in this mansion, wealth only bought silence, until the night it was shattered by a scream. A scream so sharp, so unexpected, that every chandelier seemed to tremble. Imagine this, a millionaire's wife, her hands trembling with fury, grabbing the maid's clothes, ripping them apart in front of the entire household. But what happened next was nothing like anyone expected. Before I take you deeper into this shocking story, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from right now? I love seeing how far these stories reach. And hey, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss these jaw-dropping life stories. Now, back to the mansion. The night air outside was calm, cicadas humming in the garden. But inside, the atmosphere was heavy, suffocating. The millionaire's wife, Isabella Grant, 45, elegant but sharp like broken glass, stood at the center of the grand living room. Her face burned with rage, her diamond necklace trembling against her chest as she screamed, "How dare you?" Across from her, the maid, Maria Lopez, 27, quiet, gentle-eyed, and carrying the weight of too many secrets, clutched at the shredded remains of her uniform. Her voice broke, barely a whisper. "I didn't do anything, ma'am." The millionaire himself, Edward Grant, stood frozen at the stairs. Tall, silver-haired, the kind of man whose presence normally silenced a room. Yet tonight, he looked powerless. His eyes darted between his wife and the maid, as if the truth he was hiding was finally clawing its way out. The family staff peeked nervously from the hallway, whispers spreading like wildfire. No one moved. No one dared breathe too loudly. But here's the question that no one could answer yet. Why did Isabella tear the maid's clothes in front of everyone? And why did Edward, the man who never lost control of anything in his empire, look as if his entire world was about to collapse? The storm that began in the living room that night didn't start there. It had roots, deep roots, in the past of the very maid standing humiliated before everyone. Maria Lopez wasn't just any maid. At 27, she carried herself with a quiet grace, the kind that made people wonder what her story really was. She wasn't born into servitude. No, her life had been far more complicated. Maria came from a small village miles away. Her father had been a schoolteacher, her mother a seamstress. But a tragedy, one no one in the mansion knew about, forced her into this line of work. It was the kind of tragedy that left scars deeper than the eye could see. Some nights, when the household was asleep, Maria would sit by the kitchen window, staring at the stars, whispering a name no one else had ever heard her say. But who was that name? And what secret did it carry? Isabella, the millionaire's wife, had long felt something about Maria didn't add up. Her calmness, her silence, the way Edward, the powerful man of the house, would sometimes glance at her for just a second too long. Not in desire, but in recognition. And recognition is dangerous when you're trying to hide something. "Tell me the truth, Maria." Isabella had snapped days before the incident. "Who are you really?" Maria had lowered her head, her voice trembling. "I'm just your maid, ma'am. Nothing more." But deep down, Isabella didn't believe it. Her gut told her Maria was hiding something far more dangerous than anyone dared imagine. And she wasn't the only one. The other servants in the house had begun whispering too. They noticed how Maria always avoided personal questions, how she flinched whenever Edward's name was mentioned. So when Isabella tore Maria's dress that night in front of everyone, it wasn't just about rage. It was about exposing her, stripping away the mask. But here's the chilling part. What if Maria's secret wasn't just about her past? What if it was about the Grants themselves? Edward Grant sat alone in his study, the storm outside thundering against the glass walls of his mansion. The air smelled of old leather and cigar smoke, the kind of scent that clung to money and secrets. His mahogany desk was polished to perfection, but one drawer stood out, a drawer that had not been opened in years. Every time he passed it, a sharp pang pierced his chest. Inside was a letter, one he had promised himself he would never read again. But tonight, after Isabella's public humiliation of Maria, Edward's hands trembled toward the drawer. Something in Maria's eyes when her dress was ripped apart, something in her silence, reminded him of a story he had buried long ago. The drawer creaked open. The letter lay folded, yellowing at the edges, sealed with a faded ribbon. He untied it, the paper whispering secrets as it unfolded. To Edward Grant. "If anything happens to me, promise me you'll look after her. She is more than she seems. She carries both our futures in her hands. No signature, only those haunting words. His heart raced. He had received the letter 27 years ago, but never knew what her meant. Until now. Could it be Maria? Was this the connection Isabella had sensed all along? The fire crackled in the hearth, but Edward's mind was in turmoil. He pictured his late friend, Alejandro, who had vanished under mysterious circumstances decades ago. Could Maria be tied to him? The questions twisted tighter and tighter, choking him. Then came the sound. Tap, tap, tap. Someone was at the study door. Edward froze, slipping the letter back inside the drawer, locking it quickly. Father, a young voice called. It was Lucas, his 19-year-old son. Why are you still awake? Edward forced calm into his tone. Business matters, son. Go back to bed. But Lucas didn't leave. His eyes flickered toward the drawer. He had seen his father's movements. Business? Lucas asked softly, his gaze sharper than usual. Or secrets? Edward stiffened. His son had always been observant, too observant. Not everything is for you to know, Edward said firmly. But the boy smirked, almost knowingly. One day, Father, secrets won't stay locked away. They always find the light. The words echoed like a prophecy. Edward extinguished the lamp. Yet even in the dark, he couldn't escape the thought that his family was standing on the edge of something unstoppable. And Maria? Maria was at the very center. While Edward wrestled with ghosts of the past, Maria was in the kitchen, hands trembling as she scrubbed dishes that were already clean. The mansion was silent, but her mind was screaming. She could still feel the sting of her torn clothes. The humiliation. The way Isabella's eyes had burned with hatred. But worse than that was the way Edward had looked at her. Not in pity, not in anger, but in recognition. Why now? She whispered to herself. The cook, old Mrs. Jenkins, shuffled in, her slippers dragging on the tiled floor. She was in her 60s, with hair as white as flour and eyes that had seen more than anyone realized. She paused, watching Maria with quiet concern. Child, she murmured, you can't wash away pain with soap. Maria froze. Mrs. Jenkins had always spoken in riddles, like she carried wisdom no one asked for. Why did she do it? Maria whispered. Why tear my dress in front of everyone? Mrs. Jenkins leaned closer, her voice low. Because truth hides in shadows, and some folks will burn the world down to keep it there. Maria swallowed hard. She wanted to ask more, but the old woman placed a wrinkled hand on her shoulder. Listen to me, Maria. I've seen families like this before. The richer the mansion, the darker the secrets. And the Grants, oh, they've built walls high enough to hide a graveyard. Maria's heart thudded painfully. A graveyard? What did the cook mean? Before she could ask, footsteps echoed down the hall. Isabella's voice cut through the silence like glass. Still awake, Maria? Scrubbing away your guilt, perhaps. Maria stiffened, turning slowly. Isabella stood in the doorway, silk robe flowing, eyes sharp as knives. You think you can fool me? Isabella hissed. I know why my husband looks at you. I know there's something you're hiding. Maria tried to speak, but no words came. Isabella stepped closer, lowering her voice. Tell me, are you here to clean my home? Or to steal it? The kitchen lights flickered, the storm outside booming like an omen. Maria clutched the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. But then Mrs. Jenkins spoke, her tone calm but powerful. Careful, ma'am. Some truths, once spoken, can't be taken back. Isabella's eyes narrowed at the old woman before she turned and stormed out. Maria exhaled shakily, but Mrs. Jenkins wasn't finished. Mark my words, the cook whispered. Your past is catching up to you. And this house will never be the same. Maria's eyes filled with tears. She had run from her past for years. But maybe Mrs. Jenkins was right. Maybe the storm wasn't outside. It was already here, inside the mansion. And soon, it would consume them all. Isabella Grant was not the kind of woman who forgot an insult, or forgave one. The night she ripped Maria's clothes had not satisfied her. If anything, it ignited a deeper fury. She paced her lavish bedroom, silk curtains swaying with every gust of wind from the storm outside. Diamonds glittered on her dresser, but her eyes were sharper than any jewel. Edward hides something from me, she whispered to her reflection. And that Maid, she's the key. Her husband's behavior after the incident had been telling. Instead of comforting her, Edward had left her alone, retreating into his study. She had heard the faint click of a drawer locking. Isabella knew that sound well. Edward only locked things when he feared what she might find. And now her gut told her that locked drawer held the answers. But Isabella wasn't just jealous. She was strategic. She had clawed her way into the Grant family through charm and calculation, and she wasn't about to let some village-born maid undo all her work. She pulled a notebook from her vanity, her private journal. Inside, she had tracked Maria's movements for weeks. The times she entered rooms, the people she spoke to, even the moments she disappeared late at night. There was one detail that stood out. At exactly midnight, twice a week, Maria would slip out of the servants' quarters and head toward the back garden. She always returned 30 minutes later. Silent, pale, shaken. Why the garden? Isabella muttered, flipping through her notes. Her mind spiraled with possibilities. Was Maria meeting someone? Was she plotting something? And then, an even darker thought surfaced. What if Edward already knew? A shiver of rage ran down Isabella's spine. If her husband and the maid were bound by some secret, then she was standing on dangerous ground. She closed the journal, her decision made. Tomorrow night, she would follow Maria into the garden. And when she discovered the truth, she would burn it into the light for everyone to see. But what Isabella didn't know was that the garden held something far more dangerous than betrayal. Something that had been buried for decades. By the way, before we continue, if you're watching this, comment below where you're tuning in from. We love seeing how far our stories reach across the world. Now back to the storm. The clock struck midnight. The mansion was asleep, but Maria was wide awake. She pulled her shawl tightly around her shoulders and slipped out the servant's door, the night air cold against her skin. Her footsteps crunched softly on the gravel path as she made her way to the back garden. The roses there were long dead, their thorns blackened by time, but Maria knew exactly where she was going. She knelt beside a small stone statue of an angel, its face worn smooth by rain. With trembling hands, she pressed against the base. The ground beneath it shifted, a loose tile, a hidden compartment. Inside lay a small wooden box. Maria's breath caught. She lifted it carefully, brushing away dirt. The box was old, scarred with scratches, its lock rusted. She carried it to the bench, moonlight casting silver across her face. Her fingers hesitated. She whispered, almost in prayer, "Forgive me, Father, but I can't hide forever." The lock gave way. Inside the box were papers, birth records, photographs, letters. She shuffled through them, her hands shaking violently. One photo slipped free. A man, tall and smiling, with eyes that mirrored her own. Her father. Tears blurred her vision. He had died years ago, or so she believed. But here was proof that he had once walked in this very place, tied somehow to the Grants. "Why were you here?" she whispered. "Why this family?" But Maria wasn't alone. In the shadows, Isabella watched, her silk robe trailing like a predator's tail. Her eyes widened at the sight of the box. Proof. Evidence. Something powerful enough to shift the balance of her marriage. Isabella's lips curled into a cruel smile. "So this is what you've been hiding." She stepped into the moonlight, her voice slicing the silence. "Tell me, Maria, were you planning to betray us all with your little treasure chest?" Maria gasped, clutching the box to her chest. "This isn't yours," she cried. "It's my family's, my past." But Isabella only laughed softly, her eyes glinting. "Oh no, dear. In this house, everything is mine, even your secrets." The wind howled through the trees, scattering leaves around them. Maria's heart pounded. She knew Isabella would never let her keep the box. But she also knew one thing. If Isabella took it, her past would be twisted into something she could never control. And so, Maria did the unthinkable. She ran. Edward Grant sat alone in his study, staring at the dying embers of the fireplace. The storm outside lashed against the mansion's tall windows, but his mind was consumed by a storm of its own. Something had shifted in his household. His wife's sudden cruelty toward Maria wasn't just jealousy, it was calculated. And Maria? Maria carried an expression lately that reminded him of someone from long ago, someone he had sworn to forget. He unlocked his desk drawer. Inside, hidden beneath contracts and estate papers, was a faded photograph, a young man in military uniform, arms slung around a smiling woman. His father. And beside him, Edward's own youthful self, barely 20. But in the background, almost unseen, was another figure. A maid. The very same eyes as Maria. Edward's hand trembled. Could it be? Impossible, he whispered. That was years before she was born. Yet the resemblance was undeniable. He leaned back, closing his eyes. His marriage to Isabella was brittle enough. If she ever discovered the truth about Maria's bloodline, if the world discovered, it could shatter everything. But fate was moving faster than Edward. At that very moment, a knock came at the door. It was Lucas, the estate steward. Calm, observant, with a voice that carried weight. Sir, Lucas said quietly, forgive me for intruding, but there is something you should know. Your wife, she was in the garden tonight. Following Maria. Edward's heart dropped. The garden. The box. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the wood. Where are they now? Lucas hesitated. I don't know, sir. But if Isabella saw what Maria found, things will never be the same. Edward clenched his fists. He had run companies, controlled fortunes, bent markets to his will. But inside his own home, power was slipping away. And for the first time in years, Edward Grant felt fear. Quick pause here. If you're watching, don't just listen. Think. What would you do if your spouse was hiding a secret that could destroy your family? Comment below. I'll be reading them. Now back to the chase. Maria's bare feet slapped against the cold marble floors as she clutched the wooden box to her chest. Every corner of the mansion suddenly felt like a trap, every shadow alive with danger. Behind her, Isabella's heels clicked steadily, a hunter closing in on her prey. You can't run forever, Maria. Isabella's voice echoed through the corridors. That box belongs to me now. Maria's heart pounded. She darted into the library, the towering shelves looming over her. Dust filled her lungs as she pressed against the wall, clutching the box tight. But Isabella's silhouette appeared in the doorway, calm and elegant despite the madness in her eyes. Do you know what happens to servants who keep secrets from their masters? She asked, stepping forward. Maria's voice cracked. I'm not just a servant. I have a right to know who I am. Isabella froze, her eyes narrowing. Who you are? Don't you dare suggest you're anything but what I say. Before Isabella could lunge, Lucas appeared at the far end of the hall. Enough! His voice thundered, commanding both women's attention. He stepped between them, his expression grim. This house has carried too many lies already. Whatever's in that box, it isn't for destroying each other. It's for the truth. Isabella sneered. Truth? You think this family survived on truth, Lucas? No, it survived on control. She turned, her silk robe swirling, and stormed out. But her parting words cut like glass. Enjoy your little discovery, Maria. Because when I'm finished, even Edward won't be able to protect you. Silence filled the hall. Maria's hands shook as she looked at Lucas. Tears welled in her eyes. She'll ruin me, Maria whispered. She'll ruin everything. Lucas placed a firm hand on her shoulder. Not if we reveal the truth before she twists it. But you must be ready. The truth may not be what you hope. Maria clutched the box tighter, her chest heaving. For the first time, she realized the truth wasn't just her salvation. It could be her undoing. And somewhere else in the mansion, Isabella plotted her next move. Hours later, Maria sat in the servants' quarters with the box open before her. Candlelight flickered across the yellowed papers inside. Lucas sat opposite, his weathered hands folded, his face grave. The documents were shocking. Birth records, with names she didn't recognize. Letters signed with the Grant family crest. Receipts for payments made to a woman in secret. And then the photograph. A child, swaddled in a blanket. On the back, in faded ink, it read, Maria, our hidden light. Her breath caught. This is me. Lucas nodded slowly. You are not who you think you are. You were never just a maid. You were hidden, protected. Someone wanted you close to this house, but not acknowledged. Maria's eyes filled with tears. Why hide me? Why let me grow up with nothing, while this family lived in wealth? Lucas's gaze darkened. Because power fears scandal. And the Grants have always feared scandal more than anything. The candle sputtered. Outside, thunder rattled the windows. Maria felt the walls of the room closing in. If she was connected by blood to the Grants, then everything changed. She wasn't just an outsider anymore. She was family. But that truth came with danger. If Isabella knew, she would twist it into a weapon. Maria whispered, What do I do now? Lucas leaned forward, his eyes steady. You decide whether to stay silent or reveal who you truly are. But whichever path you choose, the family will never be the same again. And at that exact moment, the door creaked open. Edward stepped inside, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the box. "Maria," he said, his voice heavy with dread. "We need to talk." Edward stood in the doorway, his face a mask of turmoil. The crackling thunder outside seemed to echo the storm raging in his chest. Maria rose to her feet, clutching the photograph like it was proof she existed. "Tell me the truth," she demanded. "Why was I hidden? Why am I here?" Edward closed the door softly behind him, as if sealing away the outside world. His voice was low, heavy with years of unspoken guilt. "You were brought here for protection. When you were born, it threatened everything." Maria's hands trembled. Protection or control? He didn't answer immediately. His eyes darted to Lucas, then back to Maria. "Your mother was someone I loved long before Isabella. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And when you came into this world, the family decided you couldn't exist, not publicly. If the media had found out, it would have destroyed the Grant name." Maria staggered back, her lips quivering. "You're saying you're my father?" The silence that followed was suffocating. The only sound was the rain hammering the windows. Edward finally whispered, "Yes." The air collapsed. Everything Maria thought she knew, her childhood, her struggles, her loneliness, suddenly felt like a cruel joke. She had been serving in the house of her own blood. Lucas closed his eyes, the weight of the confession hanging heavy. Edward stepped closer, his voice trembling for the first time in decades. "I wanted to keep you close, Maria. I couldn't acknowledge you, but I couldn't lose you either. That's why you were brought here as a maid. It was the only way." Maria's tears spilled freely now. "The only way? Do you know what it felt like to live beneath the feet of people who were supposed to be my family? To be treated like dirt while you watched?" Edward's chest heaved. "I thought I was protecting you. From Isabella. From the press. From the world." But Maria's voice cut through like a blade. "You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your name." While truth unraveled in the servants' quarters, Isabella was upstairs in her bedroom, pacing like a caged lioness. The storm outside seemed to mirror her fury. She had seen the box. She had seen Maria's face. And though she didn't yet know every detail, her instincts screamed the truth. Maria wasn't just a maid. She was something far more dangerous. A half-sister? A daughter? A rival? Whatever it was, Isabella would not allow her empire, her marriage, or her reputation to be shattered by a servant's claim. She walked to her vanity, pulled open the drawer, and retrieved her phone. With deliberate calm, she dialed a number. "Detective Rowe," she whispered, her tone icy. "I need surveillance on someone in my house. No questions asked. Tonight." On the other end, the detective's gruff voice replied, "Consider it done." Isabella hung up, her reflection staring back at her in the mirror. Perfectly groomed, perfectly in control. But her eyes burned with a venomous fire. Her thoughts spiraled. If Maria truly was connected to Edward, then exposing her would not only humiliate the maid, it would destroy Edward himself. And perhaps that was the punishment he deserved. She turned to the door, her decision made. This wasn't just about jealousy anymore. This was war. Quick pause here. Let me ask you, if you discovered your partner was hiding a child all these years, would you fight to destroy them or forgive? Comment below. I'm curious how many of you believe in forgiveness. Now, back to the storm. Later that night, Edward led Maria and Lucas into the grand dining hall. The chandeliers glowed softly, their light bouncing off polished silver. But the mood was anything but warm. On the table lay the contents of the box, photographs, letters, and the damning birth certificate. This family was built on power, Edward began, his voice weary. But power always demands a price. My father knew it. His father before him knew it. And now, Maria, you're caught in that legacy. Maria's voice cracked. Legacy? What legacy hides a daughter and makes her clean floors to survive? Lucas interjected gently. Sometimes, legacies aren't about honor. They're prisons made of pride. Edward's eyes softened, guilt etching deep lines across his face. I wanted to do right by you, but I failed. And now Isabella will use this against us. She's already moving pieces you don't see. Maria looked at the papers again. One letter stood out, its words faded but legible. She must never know. Her life depends on silence. Her chest tightened. All these years my life was stolen by silence. Edward leaned forward, his tone desperate. But now you have a choice. Stay hidden or step into the fire. If you claim your place, the world will know. but the world will also come for you. Maria's heart raced. A daughter in name, or a maid in safety? But before she could answer, the heavy doors swung open. Isabella entered, her heels clicking against the marble, her expression smug. "So," she said, her voice dripping with venom, "the little secret is finally on the table." The storm outside roared louder than ever. And just like that, the house was divided. The Grant Mansion's dining hall had always been a place of luxury. A massive crystal chandelier hung overhead, silver cutlery gleamed, and a long mahogany table stretched wide enough to seat 20 guests. But that night, the air was heavy. Forks clinked against plates, but no one truly ate. Maria stood silently by the side, serving dishes with steady hands. Yet inside, her chest tightened. Every glance Edward threw her way felt like a message, one Isabella did not miss. "Why do you keep looking at her, Edward?" Isabella's voice suddenly cut through the silence. The entire table froze. Even the servants stopped mid-step. Edward set his fork down carefully, his tone calm but sharp. "Because you keep making me notice her." The words sliced deeper than any scream. Isabella's face turned pale, then red with fury. She pushed her chair back, standing abruptly. "Are you saying she matters to you more than I do?" Maria lowered her eyes, but her trembling betrayed her. She had never wanted this confrontation, yet here it was, unfolding before everyone. And just when the tension reached its peak, Edward leaned forward and spoke words that shook the entire room. "You don't know the truth, Isabella. None of you do." Everyone exchanged bewildered glances. The truth? What truth? Maria's heart pounded in her chest. She prayed he wouldn't reveal it there. Not like this. But then Edward stood, walking away from the table without another word. His footsteps echoed like thunder in the silence. And so, another question lingered in the air. What truth was Edward hiding? And why did it involve Maria? Later that night, Edward summoned Maria into his private study. Only the flicker of candlelight illuminated the room. Shadows danced on the walls, making the air feel thick with secrets. "Maria," Edward said, his voice low, almost pleading, "you can't keep running from this. Sooner or later, she'll uncover everything." Maria shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "You don't understand. If she finds out, she won't just destroy me. She'll destroy you too." Edward leaned closer. "She already suspects. At this point, silence will hurt us more than the truth." Maria's voice cracked as she whispered, "Then let me carry the burden alone. You have everything to lose. Your reputation, your family name, your empire." But Edward interrupted sharply. "I also have you to lose." The weight of those words silenced her. For a moment, neither moved. The tension between them wasn't romantic. It was heavier, rooted in guilt and unfinished history. Suddenly, a knock echoed on the door. Isabella's voice carried through, sharp and demanding. "Edward, are you hiding her in there?" Maria froze. Her secret teetered on the edge of exposure. If Isabella entered, the house of lies would collapse that very night. But Edward didn't open the door. Instead, he shouted back, "Leave us alone, Isabella. You'll know the truth when it's time." His defiance only fueled her rage. Her footsteps stormed down the hallway, but not before she hissed through the wood. "If you won't tell me, I'll find out myself." Maria sank into the chair, trembling. One thing was clear. Isabella wouldn't stop until she ripped open every hidden truth. While the mansion slept restlessly that night, Isabella crept through the halls with a lantern in hand. Her satin robe dragged across the marble floor as she ascended the staircase leading to the attic. She had overheard just enough whispers, just enough fragments, to know the answer lay hidden somewhere in this house. Dust and cobwebs covered the attic, but Isabella's